The slap heard across the terminal. "You don't belong here, move." The words were cutting, but the slap that followed was sharper, echoing through Gate 17 like a gunshot. A silver badge skidded across the polished floor, spinning to a stop near the shoes of a startled businessman. Gasps broke the silence, but no one stepped forward. Charlotte Brooks, only 11 years old, stood frozen in her neatly pressed military honor uniform. The navy jacket with gold trim and the nameplate across her chest identified her as a Gold Star family representative, traveling to accept a medal on behalf of her brother, a Marine who had fallen in service. Her cheeks stung, yet she didn't flinch. The woman who struck her, flight attendant Dana Holloway, showed no remorse. "This isn't a costume party," Dana snapped. "First class is for real passengers." Charlotte didn't argue. She didn't cry. Quietly, she bent down, retrieved her badge, and held it for a moment. Then she pressed her thumb against a hidden sensor. A blue light blinked once, then red. Dana rolled her eyes. "Security will be here in 2 minutes. Maybe then you'll understand," Dana muttered. Charlotte's voice was calm, steady, far too controlled for a child who had just been slapped. "You should probably call the Department of Defense instead," she said. Within a minute, the terminal lights flickered. An announcement crackled overhead. "Notice gray flag protocol has been activated. Joint operations are temporarily suspended at this gate." Movement across the terminal halted. In 9 airports nationwide, military-linked systems went into lockdown. Flights diverted. Boarding canceled. Charlotte stood still, dust on her sleeve, badge once again pinned to her chest. She said nothing, but the power had already shifted. Dana, unaware, had no idea what she had triggered. Just an hour earlier, Charlotte had been sitting quietly in the far corner of the VIP lounge at Fort Liberty Airport. Her posture was perfect, legs crossed neatly, hands folded in her lap. Her uniform was crisp, her nameplate gleaming, the Gold Star badge placed firmly over her heart. Travelers passed without much notice. A few glanced, then looked away. Some smiled politely, assuming she was part of a school event. A woman whispered to her husband, "She must be dressed up for a parade or something." Nobody asked her why she was there. Nobody asked about her parents, but Charlotte was used to being overlooked. She kept her eyes on the digital clock above the terminal doors, counting down to the flight that would take her to Washington, D.C. There, she would receive the posthumous medal awarded to her brother, Corporal Adam Brooks, who had died in Helmand 3 months earlier. This wasn't a trip anyone wished for. Charlotte didn't crave attention, and she wasn't the kind of child who sought the spotlight. But this flight wasn't about comfort, it was about duty. That morning, her father had told her before heading back to base, "Your brother stood for something. And today, so do you." She hadn't spoken, just nodded. Now sitting alone in the lounge, she traced her finger along the edge of the polished silver badge, engraved with an eagle and 3 stars, a gift from her brother before deployment. A burst of laughter behind her broke her thoughts. Someone mocking a child in uniform. Charlotte didn't turn around. Instead, she rose, adjusted her collar, and walked toward Gate 17 with quiet determination. Telltales. A girl. No one expected. She took steady steps, unaware that within an hour the gate would grow silent, that an adult woman would confront her in front of many, and that her presence would cause disruption across 9 airports. All she carried was her brother's name across her chest, and the determination that no one would tell her she didn't belong. Dana Holloway had spent more than 18 years flying first-class routes. She could easily identify the genuine passengers, the ones who fit the part. They wore tailored suits, understated luxury watches, polished shoes, and carried themselves with a quiet confidence that came from knowing their place. Equally, she could tell who did not belong. She called it her gut test. In 5 seconds, based on posture, clothing, and tone, she was right almost every time. So, when Dana noticed a young girl in a military-style outfit near the first-class line, dragging a simple navy duffel and displaying what appeared to be a badge, her instinct said no. Children rarely belonged in that line unless they were traveling with someone important. This one had no parents, no high-end luggage, no personal assistant, only a serious face and large brown eyes that showed no fear, even though they should have. Dana stepped forward, hand raised. "Sweetheart, this line is for first-class passengers," she said with a restrained smile. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" The girl held her gaze without blinking. "Yes, ma'am." I have a boarding pass. Dana didn't bother examining it closely. The paper looked genuine, but she'd seen many convincing counterfeits before. Parents sneaking their kids into upgrades, wealthy families testing limits. What unsettled Dana most was the badge pinned neatly on the girl's chest. To her, it looked like nothing more than a prop. "Where are your parents?" Dana pressed. "They're flying separately," the girl answered evenly. "You're not military," Dana said flatly, "and you're not first class." Step aside, but the girl remained still. For the first time that day, Dana's instincts didn't give her the certainty she relied on. There was something unusual about how calm this child remained. Still, Dana did what she always did. She asserted control. She raised her voice, gestured the girl away, and when that failed, lifted her hand. At gate 17, the air grew tense. Charlotte stood firm, boarding pass in hand. Dana Holloway's tone had shifted from courteous to cutting, echoing across the space like an alarm. "Step aside," Dana hissed. "You're holding up the line." Yet the girl didn't move. Passengers behind them shifted uneasily. A man in a blazer glanced over. An older woman muttered something under her breath about how young people lacked respect. Nobody responded. Nobody asked about the badge pinned to Charlotte's chest. Dana reached toward it again. Charlotte immediately stepped back, holding it tightly with both hands. "Please don't touch that," she said quietly. Dana scoffed. "You really think you can wave around some fake badge and board a first-class flight?" Before anyone could react, Dana's hand lashed out. The slap was sharp and forceful, sending Charlotte stumbling slightly to the side. The terminal fell silent. A businessman nearby dropped his coffee in shock. A flight attendant across the counter gasped, while the gate agent froze with fingers still resting on the keyboard. Charlotte didn't cry or raise her voice. Instead, she calmly bent down, retrieved her badge, and slid her boarding pass neatly into her uniform pocket. Without hesitation, she placed one finger under the badge's base plate. A red light blinked once. A soft electronic chime echoed above. The boarding screen flickered, then went completely dark. The status bar flashed red. Gate 17 protocol lockdown. All operations suspended. Security guards glanced around, unsure of what had just been triggered. Dana stepped back, suddenly uneasy. Charlotte looked up at her, her voice steady and controlled. "You might want to contact your supervisor and the Department of Defense." Color drained from Dana's face as whispers spread quickly through the terminal. Charlotte never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Because within 57 seconds, 9 airports would suspend operations, and everyone in that terminal would be asking the same question. Who is she? The gate area remained frozen, unnervingly still for such a large airport. Phones rang urgently behind the counter. The jet bridge lights flicked off. One of the screens updated with bold red text. Gray flag protocol, level 2, awaiting command clearance. No one knew exactly what it meant, only that it was far from routine. Dana Holloway staggered back a step, her earlier confidence collapsing. This can't be," she whispered. Charlotte didn't respond. She simply moved to the corner of the gate area, sat down with the same composure she had shown in the VIP lounge, and pulled an encrypted tablet from her duffel bag. The login screen appeared. Facial recognition verified her identity. One tap was all it took. Miles away, inside a glass-walled office overlooking Washington, D.C., General Donovan Brooks glanced at his vibrating phone. He barely reacted when he saw the alert. Charlotte protocol active. Gate 17. He exhaled slowly, calm yet alert. To the public, he was the Deputy Director of Homeland Security's Joint Aviation Oversight Division. But to Charlotte, he was already irrelevant. Brooks picked up a secure line. "Connect me to FAA command immediately. Freeze the gate, isolate the staff, and deploy the backup team discreetly." Civilian panic level remains at 0. Behind him, a large digital map flickered. 9 airports turned red in unison, each triggered by a single access badge. Charlotte's. Meanwhile, at Gate 17, Dana was still making excuses to the gate agent who had stopped listening. A woman in uniform approached Charlotte. No airline branding, only a military headset. She leaned in, spoke softly. Charlotte gave a single nod. Without hesitation, the woman walked toward the captain's cabin. Passengers began whispering among themselves. Charlotte stayed still, hands folded, quietly observing the reaction around her. She wasn't there to frighten anyone. She wasn't acting out of anger. She simply refused to let the world forget her brother's name. And thanks to the man on the other end of that call, the world was about to be reminded. Within 20 minutes, Gate 17 started trending. It began with a blurry photo. A young woman in a military-style uniform sitting calmly while airline staff rushed in the background. That single image set everything in motion. The moment everything broke. The caption read, "What did this child do to shut down an entire gate?" Then came the smartphone clips. Dana Holloway striking Charlotte, followed by the sudden flicker of dimmed lights and the boarding screens going dark. Soon after, someone uploaded audio from the overhead announcement. Another added subtitles. By the time Charlotte lifted her eyes from her tablet, CNN, Reuters, and 2 local stations had already requested her Department of Defense file. The file wasn't denied or restricted. It was locked, sealed at a national level. Files don't get locked unless they tie into something much larger. By the time Dana grasped how serious things were, the damage was already done. Her image was everywhere. A still from the video, her hand mid-slap, face strained with anger, captioned, "She struck a Gold Star child." Dana hadn't known who the girl was. She just worked first class. Meanwhile, Charlotte sat silently, showing no reaction. Neither smile nor tears. Across from her, a man in a baseball cap, a Navy veteran, leaned in gently. "Was it your brother?" Charlotte gave a small nod. "Helmand Province, 3 months ago." The veteran placed a hand to his chest. "Semper Fi," Charlotte whispered back. "Thank you." At the same time, Dana was escorted away by 2 men in uniforms she didn't recognize. They weren't TSA, not airline staff. These were federal. The gate agent left his desk, speaking quietly into a radio. Around them, murmurs grew louder. No one defended Dana now. Charlotte stood, smoothed her sleeves, and walked to the window. She hadn't come to ruin anyone, but some reminders need to be public. That even the quietest passenger might carry a name worth honoring. Later, Charlotte sat in a private security room, her small frame swallowed by an oversized leather chair. A cup of water sat untouched beside her, condensation spreading on the table. 2 men in dark suits entered. They weren't airline or airport staff. They were from the Federal Aviation Ethics Division, a joint task force so obscure most had never heard of it. The taller man sat first. His tone was calm but intent. "Charlotte Brooks, we know who you are. What we need is confirmation." Charlotte straightened, posture steady the way her brother had taught her. "Yes, sir," she said. "Authorization Alpha, November 7th. That was all. 1 sentence. The tablet in her bag gave a sharp chime. The 2 men exchanged quick looks. Within seconds, the overhead screen. The screen flickered on, showing a federal seal, 5 redacted lines, and finally, access granted, Skylock clearance level 4. ID, Brooks, Charlotte. Unit 17. The shorter man leaned forward. "Charlotte, do you understand what triggering the gray flag protocol means?" She met his eyes. "It means 9 airports suspend operations until both the FAA and DoD review the incident." "And do you know who has the authority to activate it?" "Yes," she replied. "My father. Or me." Silence filled the room. Back at Gate 17, Dana was led off the floor without a word. No apology, no farewell. The passengers had already cleared out, but not before someone cast live news coverage onto the airport wall. Dana's photo loomed behind her, frozen mid-exit, marked with shame. She had no idea Charlotte's badge wasn't a trinket. It belonged to Skylock, a classified federal identification system created for dependents of high-risk defense families, especially those honored posthumously. The badge carried an ethics override, allowing its bearer to flag real-time airport violations for federal review whenever dignity or protocol was ignored. Only 3 children in the country had it. Charlotte was one of them. The man with the tablet spoke gently. "Why did you use it?" Charlotte paused, not because she didn't know, but because she wanted her words to be precise. "I didn't activate it because she hit me," she said softly. "I did it because she disrespected my brother's sacrifice, dismissed my badge as fake, and treated me like I had no worth." The room went silent again. Finally, the taller agent leaned back, exhaled, and said, "The protocol is valid. No violations on your part." Charlotte didn't move. She asked if I was pretending to be military, she added. I'm not. I'm family. Meanwhile, in a secure FAA terminal, General Donovan Brooks addressed 6 officials from the FAA, Homeland Security, and the Department of Defense. Each had a folder still unopened. My daughter followed Skylock ethics protocol exactly as written, he said firmly. That system exists because 2 years ago another Gold Star child was forced off a flight for wearing a uniform. No one intervened then. We didn't build this for headlines. We built it so dignity would never again be discarded as policy. A younger executive shifted in his seat. Still, 9 airports shut down. That's significant. Brooks met his gaze. So was the cost of silence. Back at the airport, media outlets began adjusting their coverage. Charlotte was no longer framed as the child behind a shutdown. She was now Charlotte Brooks, daughter of General Donovan Brooks and sister of fallen hero Corporal Adam Brooks. A new clip circulated quickly, Dana rolling her eyes just before the slap. Captioned, "When arrogance meets consequences, at the gate," the announcement echoed, "Boarding is now resuming at Gate 17. First-class passengers only." Beginning with Miss Charlotte Brooks, Dana was gone. The crew had been replaced. Charlotte stood, her badge catching the light like steel. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate, she simply walked past the whispers, past the stairs, and onto the plane. In seat 1A, no one questioned if she belonged. Not anymore. By the time Charlotte's flight lifted off, Dana Holloway's world had unraveled in less than 3 hours. It began with a suspension notice on the tarmac, brief, cold, unsigned. Minutes later, her airline credentials were revoked. When she tried to log into the crew system, her profile read, "Status, under federal investigation. Do not assign flights." A security guard appeared. They escorted her out of the restricted zone. No ceremony, no apology, just silence. Meanwhile, Falcon Air's internal HR chat room erupted. Staff members shared screenshots of the circulating video. Former employees began posting anonymous accounts about Donna, her tone, her attitude, and how she often behaved as though she owned the first-class cabin. Then came the boardroom call. Falcon Air's CEO was already under pressure from the FAA, which had flagged the airline for failing to renew mandatory bias training for senior staff. That training had lapsed 8 months earlier. This single incident exposed a backlog of negligence. Worse, the activation of the gray flag protocol had automatically triggered a system-wide ethics hold across all Falcon Air flights passing through federal airspace. As a result, 9 airports delayed Falcon operations by 3 hours. $6.7 million in partnership contracts were temporarily suspended, and their Sky Priority access at 2 major terminals was revoked pending review. The airline's communications director tried a soft statement. "We are conducting an internal review and remain committed to dignity and inclusion." But it came too late. Social media had already taken over the narrative. On board, Charlotte sat quietly. Another flight attendant, not Dana, offered her tea and a blanket. She said nothing, but her expression conveyed what words could not. Respect, not pity. Across the aisle, a businesswoman leaned over and told Charlotte, "I hope you know how many people needed to see what you did today." Charlotte answered softly, "I didn't do it for them." She paused. "But I'm glad they were watching." In Washington, D.C., General Brooks addressed a closed-door press panel. His tone was steady but firm. "This isn't about a slap. It's about a culture in aviation that has allowed uniform judgment to outweigh basic human decency." Beside him, the FAA administrator added, "The Skylock system was built for moments like this. It worked, and now all federal air partners must undergo a 72-hour ethics compliance audit." When asked if Falcon's licenses were at risk, Brooks didn't hesitate. "They already are." Elsewhere, in a plane conference room, Dana sat alone awaiting a hearing to determine whether her actions would disqualify her from future FAA certification. No lawyers, no union representative, only a silent screen displaying, "Pending review, violation of Section 17C, Ethics Clause, respect toward protected parties." Above it, a still frame from the viral video showed her hand frozen mid-air. She tried to defend herself. She hadn't meant it, she was under pressure, she thought the girl was faking. But the truth was clear. She never asked, never paused, she assumed. The very system she once believed would shield her was now exposing her. Back in the sky, Charlotte looked out the window as clouds drifted past. Her badge lay beside her, Its light off, protocol ended, systems restored. She wasn't angry, but she was changed. And so was the system that had overlooked girls like her, families like hers, for far too long. The badge was never just a badge. The captain gave a calm notice about incoming turbulence. Charlotte whispered to herself, "Let them feel it." Not out of revenge, but because some lessons are only learned when skies aren't smooth. The press conference was never meant for the public, but after 3 federal agencies and 2 Senate committees stepped in, transparency became unavoidable. At exactly 2:00 p.m., in a room lined with American flags and FAA insignias, General Donovan Brooks took the podium. His uniform was flawless, his posture rigid, his expression the same composed strength that once led missions overseas. But today he stood not as a general but as a father. "Let me be clear," he began. Charlotte Brooks did not break protocol. She followed it. And the system functioned exactly as intended. For the moments when dignity is denied not by danger, but by arrogance, a journalist asked, "Sir, can you confirm who approved your daughter's Skylock credentials?" Brooks answered without hesitation. "I did," after she laid her brother to rest. The room fell silent. Corporal Adam Brooks, Marine Corps, killed in action. Helmand Province, March 9th. Charlotte was 12 when she received that badge. It wasn't a gift, it was a designation. She trained for months, passed simulations with scores higher than some TSA agents. She earned it. Another reporter pressed, "Does she still hold that access?" He nodded. As of today, she remains one of only 3 civilian miners with Level 4 Skylock clearance. Then he leaned toward the mic. If the airline had simply listened, if that crew member had paused to ask instead of react, none of this would have been necessary. Across the nation, airline boards scrambled to review policies and download training materials they had long set aside. At Falcon Air headquarters, the CEO watched the broadcast silently, then picked up the phone to call the FAA Compliance Council. Because now this wasn't about one girl. It was about what happens when silence collides with a badge grounded in truth. 3 days after the Gate 17 incident, the FAA issued a statement that sent shockwaves through aviation. No bold headlines, no theatrics, just a quiet memo titled Implementation of the Dignity Protocol, effective immediately. Inside were 4 pages set to reshape airline operations. Every major U.S. carrier was now required to provide quarterly ethics training, not just for flight attendants, but for all staff who interact with passengers. Any crew member found in violation of ethics toward a Skylock-designated dependent would face immediate federal review. The FAA would also publish quarterly compliance reports, naming airlines that failed inspections. Most notably, the Skylock badge program, once confidential, was now recognized as a protected federal designation under Homeland Security. Charlotte's name was never written, but insiders knew. And when the document was released, her ID, Brooks Unit 17, appeared under active designations. At a small press table, a retired airline captain was asked how he felt about the new rules. He paused, then leaned forward. "I've seen war heroes fly in coach without a word of complaint. I've also seen first-class passengers act entitled, but that girl, she never once raised her voice. The price of one moment. She didn't have to prove it." Pause. That's what real strength looks like. And now, the skies would start to reflect that truth. In Washington, Charlotte sat by her bedroom window quietly watching jets pass overhead. Her badge was now stored away in a drawer, but its effect was already reshaping how nations approached aviation. Within a week, 9 countries requested access to Skylock protocol documents. Japan submitted a formal inquiry. Canada began an initial ethics review for all domestic airlines. In London, Heathrow's operations board voted 6-1 to suspend cooperation with any carrier that failed to meet passenger dignity standards by the end of the quarter. What began as a ripple had grown into a wave. Media outlets shifted focus from the incident in the terminal to the young girl who pushed 9 airports to reconsider their policies. But Charlotte wasn't interested in news coverage. She was back at school, uniform pressed, badge put away. When her history teacher mentioned aviation ethics reform as a current event, she kept quiet. She wasn't looking for recognition. She only wanted to prevent others from facing what she did. That evening, General Brooks knocked softly on her door. "There's someone on video call who'd like to speak with you," he said. "International. Charlotte walked over to the screen. A composed, professional woman appeared, the flag of the European Aviation Commission behind her. "Miss Brooks," she said warmly, "we'd like to invite you to speak at the Global Passenger Ethics Forum next month in Brussels." Charlotte hesitated. "I'm just a kid." The woman smiled. "And yet you reminded an entire industry of what it had overlooked." Outside, a plane crossed the sunset sky. For the first time in years, Charlotte looked up, not with sorrow, but with quiet pride. Change doesn't always arrive with noise. Sometimes it lands softly, but it lasts. The ballroom in Brussels was filled with representatives from over 40 nations, suits, flags, cameras. Yet attention turned as an 11-year-old girl stepped onto the stage. No dramatic gesture, only steady steps and calm focus. Charlotte Brooks adjusted the microphone. She spoke without notes. "You don't need a badge," she began, "to know when something is wrong." The room stilled. "What happened to me wasn't unusual. That's the issue. It was considered normal, and sometimes normal has to be challenged." She paused, meeting the eyes of airline leaders, regulators, and ethics officers. "My brother taught me that silence can carry dignity, but silence can also allow harm to continue. So I chose to speak." Another pause, gentler this time. "And if a child can push for change with just one badge and one decision, what's stopping you?" A long silence followed. Then came a standing ovation. Measured, not loud, but lasting. 1 month later, 23 nations signed the Passenger Ethics Accord. Soon after, the FAA introduced the Gate 17 initiative. Telltale's Gate 17 was only the beginning. An ethics framework was introduced, quietly named in recognition of where it all started. Dana Holloway's FAA license was permanently revoked. Falconeer was placed under strict federal oversight for 2 years. And Charlotte? She returned home, back to her studies, back to her quiet life. Her badge stayed locked away in a drawer, kept safe. She hoped she would never need it again. But across airports and training centers worldwide, new signs appeared. Dignity is not optional. It's policy. Every time a crew member saw those words before a flight, they might not have known the girl who inspired them. But they understood the message and the cost of ignoring it. What about you? If you were in Charlotte's place, just 11 years old, yet holding the power to ground an entire airline, what choice would you have made? Share where you're watching from and let us know. Do you believe dignity in the skies can truly be enforced? Or is it still only reserved for a select few?